During my parents' divorce proceedings in court, they both clung to my sister and wouldn't let go. When my turn came, they just vaguely asked me whom I wanted to choose, their tone clearly conveying their fear that I might cling to either of them. I paused for a moment. Could I borrow $200? I'm sick, I asked. This request infuriated them. All you care about during our divorce is money. Have you become obsessed with it? They exclaimed. What illness needs just $200? You're just conning money at such a young age. But $200 wasn't even enough for a single chemotherapy session. I just wanted to buy some new clothes to leave with dignity. Little did I know, that mere $200 would bring them a lifetime of regret. I died in the courtyard of my grandfather's dilapidated house, buried under the heavy snow as if I had never existed. The coat, too short to cover my swollen, frostbitten ankles, failed to fulfill my wish for a new, dignified outfit. Before I died, my soul drifted over 300 kilometers away to a place vibrant with lights and bustling activity, where neon dazzled. That was the home of my sister and parents. The whole city was lit up, awaiting the chime of the midnight bell. Oh, it was almost New Year. Unconsciously, my soul reached the living room, which was festively decorated. My mother proudly showed my sister the new clothes and boots she had bought her, several outfits. And she didn't even have to wait until midnight to put on new clothes, but my sister, engrossed in her video game, barely glanced at them and didn't respond. Not knowing whether out of boredom or anger, my mother put down the clothes and cursed in the direction of my grandfather's house. That dead girl, not even calling home during the new year, always the coldest one in the family. My soul just watched her, stunned, visible but untouchable, and my voice, unheard. My father clicked his tongue impatiently. Let's not bring up upsetting matters during the new year. The atmosphere turned lively again, and the big snow made the spring character on the windowsill look exceptionally festive. But they didn't know, the one they always despised, had already left this world completely, never to trouble them again. Would they regret abandoning me if they knew I had died 5 months ago? My parents took their divorce to court. In court, they both clung to my sister and wouldn't let go, subtly pushing me aside. My sister's princess dress nearly deformed under their uncompromising tug, her soft little hands covered in woolen gloves as she covered her ears, a picture of utter distress. I won't choose, I won't. Dressed in a fall jacket, I stomped my foot, awkwardly shrinking to the side, unconsciously scratching the unbearable itch of my frostbite. I felt like an outsider. My mother half-hugged my sister's arm, refusing to let go. I don't want Luna to end up like Sarah, always begging. She must stay with me. My father stubbornly pulled my sister's hand. If you don't want Sarah, what should become of her? Why should I have to take her? My mother was unyielding. Sarah is old enough to take care of herself. I don't need her. She can't possibly die. Can she? The judge sighed. I am Sarah, and my sister is Luna. Like the laws that govern the celestial bodies, there are many stars, but only one moon. There are many Sarah, but only one Luna, and the Sarah all revolve around Luna. That has been my life. After some discussion, my parents finally reached an agreement. Mom looked after Luna, so did Dad, and on Sundays, both watched her together. And me, with a hint of discomfort, Dad turned and asked, "What about you, Sarah?" Their voices were muffled as they spoke, their eyes filled with a threatening glare. It was as if they expected a sensible reply from me, fearing I might choose one over the other. Watching their happy family of 3, I tugged at my chapped lips. Can I borrow $200? I'm sick. Mom's brow furrowed suddenly, her tone far from the gentle one she used with my sister. Have you become so obsessed with money? We're going through a divorce, and all you care about is money. How can you be so heartless? Dad was equally annoyed. What illness needs just $200? You're so young and already scheming to get money. I wish it was just a scheme for $200, but cancer doesn't lie, it really kills. A week ago, my parents celebrated my sister's birthday by taking her to Disneyland. I stood at the hospital entrance, clutching the money I had saved up for a long time, and gathered the courage to walk in. I had been bleeding inexplicably for almost a month. When I asked Mom, she said it was normal. When the results came back, the doctor's expression was grave as he asked, "Where are your parents?" Trying to brush it off, I said, "They must have gone back home for some reason. Just tell me, doctor." She couldn't persuade me otherwise and had to tell me the truth. "Little girl, unfortunately, you've been diagnosed with uterine cancer, if treated aggressively, will I be cured? You could live a few more years. The causes of this disease, besides genetic predisposition, include poverty, my own poverty, due to early puberty. I got my period at 10. But the little money my parents gave me only stretched to cheap, bulk pack sanitary pads. I used them for 5 years. Turns out, poverty really can lead to cancer. Getting cancer as a child seems like a very bad thing, but seeing the way my parents looked at me as if I were a burden, it didn't seem entirely bad. To show my sincerity, I made a serious request. Leave me the brick house in the countryside that belongs to Grandpa. I don't want to stay with either of you. Relieved, they finally relaxed. With my issue resolved, their conflict seemed to dissipate in an instant, muttering back and forth, and for the sake of my sister's mental health, they decided not to divorce and just make do. Thus, the three of them joyously celebrated the spring festival together. On TV, the familiar New Year's host smiled, joining the stars in a countdown. 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year. Mom pulled out a New Year's gift she had prepared in advance and handed it to my sister. My sister jumped up, yelling, and tore it open, her face showing a hint of disappointment. Only $6,000. Then, with a sneaky delight, it's good that my sister got nothing, all 6,000 are mine. After the countdown, the excitement faded, leaving everyone feeling somewhat listless. Dad paced the living room restlessly for a while, then stepped out. Mom went to the kitchen to cut some fruit for my sister. Lost in thought, the knife slipped onto her finger, and blood gushed out. She quickly turned and called out to the living room, Sarah. Then realizing I wasn't there, she sighed in frustration, Luna, get Mom a bandage with iodine. My brow furrowed as I watched my hand pass through Mom's, meeting only emptiness. My sister clicked her tongue impatiently, don't bother me. I'm playing a game. Mom, covering her wound helplessly, walked out with an indulgent smile. As she passed by the cabinet, her eyes caught the white medical box in the middle, and she paused, her gaze becoming distant. That was the medical kit I had prepared especially for Mom. Inside the box, besides the common cold medicine, were plasters for treating back pain. Mom had been prone to backaches since giving birth to my sister, besides massaging her tirelessly day and night. I also helped by applying these plasters to ease the pain. She picked up a plaster and fell silent as she read the instructions. I just watched her, trying to read something from her face, but there was nothing. Suddenly, she looked in my direction with annoyance. Always fussing over such useless things. Why can't you be more considerate like your sister? Don't even know what sickness you got. Is it cured yet? Mom, my illness doesn't need to be treated anymore. My biggest relief is that I will never be a burden to you again. When Dad pushed open the door, his head was covered in snow. He casually brushed it off and eagerly pulled out a letter from his pocket. I recognized it instantly. It was the letter I had sent them 2 weeks ago. I had sent him the tracking number 2 days after mailing it, but he didn't respond, probably didn't think much of it. Now, during the New Year's celebrations, he had made a special trip to retrieve it. Upon hearing it was my letter, Mom leaned in with rare interest, her expression more about enjoying the gossip. As the letter was opened, the first thing pulled out was a somewhat worn $200 note. Before they left, my parents had given me that $200. After all the twists and turns, on the day I was at my wit's end, I had only $200 left on me. Staring at the $2 vegetables in the convenience store, I debated whether to be a well-fed ghost or a starving ghost. In the end, I decided to give it all back to them. Dad's eyes briefly stalled, then he regained a look of smug control. You see, I told you she was faking her illness. She even kept the money, probably afraid we'd expose her. He didn't forget to add, daring to send the money back in anger. If she asks for money again, not a single penny for her. Let her learn who's the boss. Mom's disdain was unmistakable. So young and already so pretentious. I tell you, it's all because her grandfather spoiled her. Her life is ruined. My soul shook its head in protest. Contrarily, I had the best times of my life with my late grandfather. When I was 5, my parents had my sister. They were so busy with her that they couldn't spare any energy for me, so I was sent to live with my grandfather in the countryside. The gruff old man, with a stern face, scared me into crying the moment we met, without pausing. My parents climbed into the car while I was still rolling on the ground crying. I followed the car, chasing after it as it drove further and further away. Grandfather limped behind with his cane, frightened that he would catch up. I kept running, when I was too tired to run or cry, and collapsed on the dirt road vomiting. The old man bent down and pointed at his stooped back. Come on up. Grandpa will carry you on his back so we can keep chasing. That day, the old man, whose legs weren't as nimble as mine, was terribly exhausted, panting like an old ox. But at least I stopped causing trouble. He rummaged through the back room, managing to find milk and drinks of various colors. I'm not sure how long he had been saving them. I looked at them and disdainfully pushed them away. They're all expired. We can't drink these. Grandpa, with a pained expression, picked them up one by one to check. His eyes filled with regret. I couldn't bear to drink them myself. But no one ever comes to visit. What a waste, what a waste. At first, I used to disdain this scruffy old man, but later, I realized that this unkempt man was the one who treated me the best. The darkness in the creases of his wrinkles wasn't just dirt, it was a medal bestowed by the sun god for his harvests. In the gnarled and crooked joints of his hands, he sowed seeds of hope for life. This practical, lifelong farmer was now old, but he tended to me as he would his crops. He would carry a bamboo basket on his back in the early morning, walking miles along mountain roads to the market to buy milk to nourish my body. The family hen was lazy, laying at most 2 eggs a day. I ate one in the morning and one at night. Grandpa would cook one in the residual heat of the coal stove. The eggs would often burst open, soon filling the house with the scent of egg yolk and oil. I asked Grandpa why he didn't eat them, munching on a potato lump. He chuckled and said that eggs could make old people sick, but potatoes were the best for nourishing the body. Skeptical, I once secretly tried his frozen potato lumps. They were awful. I often asked Grandpa when my parents would come back. He said they would return when it snowed. I hated the snow. It was so cold. But I looked forward to the new year because then my parents would come back. But I never imagined I would die on such a winter night, unnoticed, on the first day of the Lunar New Year. Neighbors usually visited each other, even though my parents didn't care much for these insincere greetings. They had to force a smile for the sake of neighborhood harmony, pretending to be enthusiastic about inviting people to stay for meals. My sister was different. She ignored everyone, lounging on the sofa, obliviously shouting, "Attack, attack." As we chatted, neighbor Wendy suddenly asked about me. "Where's Sarah?" Seeing my parents' silence, she hinted with her words. "Sarah is such a sensible girl. You've bought a house now. Why send Sarah to the countryside for the new year?" My parents, with awkward smiles, made excuses. "The countryside is great. The air is 100 times better than the city's concrete and steel." But initially, my parents had been desperate for my sister to settle in the city, back when they could only afford to rent a place in the city, a 2-bedroom apartment, one for them and one for my sister, while I was in the countryside. I was so excited when my parents finally came home for the new year. I wanted to hug them, but my mother, feigning surprise, pushed me away. "Oh, Sarah, why are you so dark? You look like a little black girl." Then, both of them were sent into fits of laughter by my mother's attempt at being witty. At that moment, my insecurities were magnified to the extreme. The mountain sun is harsh, and all the kids are quite dark, even though we walked miles to the market. Our clothes were always out of fashion and unsold for a long time, but this was the best Grandpa could give me. I eventually became just another unkempt kid in their eyes, but my sister, trailing behind our parents, was completely different. She wore a pink lace princess dress, her cheeks soft and pale. She smelled lovely all over. Her hair was curled like egg rolls, tied at the back with a huge black bow, making her look just like a princess from a TV show. Mom and Dad always said they owed a lot to Sarah over the years and couldn't let Luna suffer like that in the future. As a result, they doubled their affection towards my little sister, giving her anything she wanted. My sister had a doll that could blink, call out, "Mommy," and even change its clothes. When I wanted it, Mom and Dad would say, "We'll buy it for you next time. You need to be understanding. It's not easy for us." How distant is next time? Perhaps they will realize it when they see my body. In front of my sister, I always felt an overwhelming sense of inferiority. She would point at my chapped, ruddy cheeks and loudly exclaim, "You country folk, do you even know what KFC is? Do you know what Starbucks is? You smell like cows." She would publicly embarrass me, leaving me feeling awkward and mortified. My sister could throw a tantrum and cry in our parents' arms just because her shoes got a little muddy. Standing beside her, I didn't even have the courage to ask for a hug. Eventually, my parents bought a new house with 3 bedrooms and a living room, one for them, one for my sister, and one guest room. While I still stayed in the countryside, during the summer holidays, they would graciously invite me to stay for a while. I will never forget how my sister blocked the door with her little leather shoes and yelled at me with my suitcase in hand, "Get out of my house, you stinking bumpkin." I bowed my head in hurt, my toes nervously clutching my pink crystal sandals, tears swirling in my eyes. My parents were busy trying to bribe my sister to let me in. "Mom and Dad have to work. We can't take care of you, but your sister can cook for you. If you agree, Mom will buy you a transformer. And your sister can help you with your studies. Isn't that great? Give Dad a break." That whole summer was an endless cycle of cooking and washing clothes, punctuated by my sister's taunts calling me a country bumpkin. Usually, before the summer even ended, I would be sent back to the countryside. My parents said it was inconvenient for me to stay, but never specified what or for whom it was inconvenient. As soon as I stepped out, my mother would start disinfecting every corner of the house with alcohol, its spray dispersing in the sunlight into a vast mist, like a fog or a blossom, beautiful yet heartbreaking. Eventually, I got used to staying in the countryside with my grandfather. I grew accustomed to rolling in the mud in summer and chopping wood with him in the mountains during winter. The neighbors' dogs and geese would greet me warmly. After a day of wild play, Grandpa would wipe the mud from my face with a faded rag, smiling and calling me his sweet child. But the good days always come to an end. That winter, as I helped Grandpa stack firewood not yet as tall as me, my parents came back. They wanted to take me with them, but I didn't want to go, which made them angry. Impatiently, they asked me to choose between staying with them or with Grandpa. Grandpa made the decision for me, sternly telling my parents to take me away. I always felt there was something wrong with this situation. My mother casually handed Grandpa $500. I told Grandpa to wait for me, that I would definitely come back soon, and he nodded repeatedly. Before leaving, Grandpa, dressed in new clothes he kept under the cupboard, shakily turned around, and asked if he looked good. I touched the round golden patterns on his clothes and nodded. Yes, it looks good. At that time, I was naive, unable to recognize the style of a burial garment. Nor did I realize that it would be my last time seeing Grandpa. He affectionately patted me and gave me some advice. As I leaned against the shaky car window, I watched Grandpa's stooped figure grow smaller, closing the door behind him, like the end of an old story. When I checked later, I found the $500 in my pocket. Only later did I learn that my parents came to take me because Grandpa was seriously ill and didn't have much time left. Once again, my parents left me alone at home to accompany my sister to her dance classes, making me miss Grandpa even more. At that moment, a phone call struck me like a bolt from the blue. My grandfather had passed away, and I pleaded with my parents to take me to see him one last time. My father hesitated, while my mother, indifferent and resolute about needing to accompany my sister to her dance class, flatly refused. After a brief symbolic argument, they reached a consensus. My sister was the priority. I was left crying and wailing at the classroom door, the subject of everyone's ridicule. They even held my grandfather's funeral behind my back to spare themselves my annoying presence. As if I were a bothersome snail, my grandfather disappeared as silently and inconspicuously as a speck of dust. Yet the memories weigh on me like Mount, constantly suffocating me. The death of a loved one isn't just a storm, it's a lifelong dampness. I always feel it's my fault, that I shouldn't have left my grandfather, that it was my wrong choice. I am trapped in this dampness, stirring up storms on days that should have been calm. Years have passed, and the old man is still upset with me, never once visiting me in my dreams. Even when I die, he won't come to see me. These days I've been wandering around my parents' house, watching them visit friends and relatives as if everything were normal, lively even. But as the night deepens, both seem troubled. My father tosses and turns, unable to sleep, and finds my mother sitting on the living room couch, lost in thought, clutching an envelope with $200. They comfort each other like flames, warming each other in a heavy snow. Sarah's grown up now. She should be able to take care of herself, right? My father nods hesitantly. Yeah, Sarah's been capable since she was little. She'll definitely be fine on her own, don't worry. I wonder if they are comforting my mother or themselves. Perhaps even they feel that such a cold winter night could freeze someone to death. But not Sarah. The windows fog up, unable to keep out the howling snowstorm outside. My father, somewhat emotional yet proud, says, "We raised her, fed her, quenched her thirst, and even provided our old home to shelter her." My mother leans on his shoulder, smiling slightly. "Exactly, such a big house back home, more comfortable than where we live. What parents could do more? We've done enough." They don't realize that a house needs people as much as people need a house. A rural house can stand for 100 years with someone living in it, but falls apart in a year if left empty. After grandfather died, the house died too. It became dilapidated and leaky, hardly providing any shelter from the elements. They become more animated, discussing my faults. It seems the more they criticize me, the more it soothes their restless hearts. They complain about my fussiness, my sentimentality, and how I stopped sharing my heart with them after the age of 5, questioning what was the point in raising me. They said raising a dog would have been better. At least a well-fed dog wags its tail at its owner. I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. When I died, I was skin and bones, long unfamiliar with the feeling of being full. My sister, woken by the noise, stormed into the living room, furious. "Enough already. I've stayed up late enough today. Can't you two keep it down?" My parents instantly fell silent. My sister yawned absent-mindedly. "Give me another 5,000. I still owe my classmates money," I pleaded. My parents sat there, simultaneously looking rather displeased. The comforting words they had exchanged just moments ago seemed to have lost their effect as their gazes unwillingly drifted toward the $200 on the table. Dad lifted his head and tentatively asked my sister, "I've always been fair to both you and your sister, right?" On hearing this, my sister immediately retorted indignantly, "That's not fair." She didn't even pause to think. Every year, sister gets to roam around the countryside freely without anyone bothering her, while I have to attend various tutoring classes and learn all sorts of musical instruments. You clearly favor her and are more lenient with her. Perhaps my sister genuinely felt shortchanged, but it was clear that our parents' faces were turning red with frustration. Our mom and dad fair. On the day they walked out of the courtroom, they hadn't divorced. Dad hesitantly pulled out 2 notes from his wallet and spoke earnestly, "Your mom and I haven't abandoned you. After all, you are our child too. If you ever face any difficulties." Mom nudged Dad with her elbow, cutting him off. Dad choked a bit. "We'll talk about it later." Then the 3 of them walked away without looking back. I checked many hotels for accommodation, and even the cheapest was at least $60 per day. My best option was to find a job that provided meals and accommodation, but after wandering the streets for days, I couldn't find any suitable work. Being resourceful, I spent my nights at an internet cafe where it was warm. As long as I had the nerve, I could even sleep on the chairs. When I got hungry, I'd buy a packet of instant noodles for $1.5, get some hot water from the manager, and hold the bag closed for a while until it emitted a fragrant scent. It was only when I was about to eat that I encountered a problem. No fork. Was I supposed to eat with my hands? As I hesitated about whether to go ahead, the cafe manager, without lifting his head from the keyboard, magically pulled a pair of disposable chopsticks from a drawer, leftovers from his takeout meals. I quickly nodded and bowed in thanks. He then glanced at me, eyed the surveillance camera overhead, and secretly handed me a sausage. "This one's on me." The sausage was corn-flavored and delicious. I didn't waste a single crumb, slurping everything clean. At that moment, I thought noodles with sausage was the most delicious combination, and I wished I could eat it every day, but I also felt worthless, so I swore I wouldn't spend my life in an internet cafe. Things got better after that. I started collecting bottles on the streets. I looked for jobs during the day and picked up trash on the side, crushing cans with a stylish pose. I carried a sack on my back like a wandering knight, free and unbound. One day, a woman in her 40s or 50s stopped me. "Young lady, interested in a high-paying job. It involves making calls in an office, $8,000 a month, meals and accommodation included." My eyes lit up, and suddenly even plastic bottles didn't seem appealing anymore. Just as I was about to follow her, the owner of a nearby bubble tea shop burst out furiously and started yelling at us, "You scammer. Try scamming someone in front of my shop again and I'll call the cops right now." The woman took off running with a speed that even Bolt couldn't match. The shop owner, relentless, turned to me and began scolding, "Are you a fool to believe someone like that? If you keep acting up, I'll cart you off to a remote mountain valley to be a wife for some old bachelor." So stupid, looking up at the milk tea shop's big, bright red sign. I grabbed onto the shop owner's legs, asking if he could hire me to work there. After learning my age, he shook his head. No, you're not of working age yet. I definitely can't hire you. Sighing, it looked like I had to start rummaging through trash bins earlier. If I went too late, others would have already scavenged through them. Dejected, I let go of his legs and picked up my sack, ready to leave. He, holding his head in distress, yelled, "The counter's pretty dirty, and we're short on staff, can't keep up." I was quick on the uptake and immediately rolled up my sleeves to help him clean the counter. By noon, I had nearly cleaned the whole shop. The shop owner kept a stern face, as if worried that I might trick him. "Don't think I'm keeping you on for work. This is just to thank you for your help. I'm offering you a meal." I nodded eagerly, as I loved eating. At the table, the shop owner's wife added an extra portion of braised pork just for me. I stared at the shiny, succulent braised pork, swallowing my saliva and reluctantly picking at the vegetables in front of me. As I chewed on the greens, I imagined their oily, sweet taste. Pretending it was the pork, the shop owner placed 2 pieces of the braised pork into my bowl with his chopsticks. "Why aren't you eating the meat? Eat up, and grab more." The other shop employees also started adding food to my bowl, telling me not to be shy. I was a bit surprised. Once, dining with my parents, I had picked up an extra serving of tomato and egg stir-fry because I loved it, and my mother scolded, "Only picking the eggs, huh?" Then, I switched to eating peanuts, and my father teased, "How many have you eaten?" "I'm counting." Since then, I never dared to reach for the nicer dishes on the table. I forgot this wasn't home. I could take the dishes I liked. That meal, I licked the bowl clean, the fullest I had been in a long time. Before this, even dreaming of a bag of instant noodles was a luxury. At $1.5 per pack, that's $4.5 a day, and $135 a month. Who could afford that? So I got smart, squatting by the convenience store door, unboxing mystery boxes. At closing time, they would deal with the expired boxed meals. At 9:30 p.m. with a strong wind and a bit of luck, I might find a day-old boxed meal or sandwich. Sometimes they were smeared with some disgusting liquid, but no problem. A wipe was all it needed. Eventually, when the staff came to throw out the trash, they'd run into me scavenging. They'd look at me strangely, but I had thick skin. After that, they didn't wait until 9:30 p.m. to dispose of things. Instead of tossing them in the trash, they'd leave them on the stone bench next to the bins. Mostly it was bread that was still far from expiring and fresh boxed meals, all clean. I didn't have to freeze squatting for food anymore, and I ate better than I did at my parents' house. The sisters at the shop curiously asked how I ended up homeless. I mumbled, claiming I was an orphan with no parents. It wasn't far from the truth. In the evening, they wouldn't let me return to the internet cafe, saying there was a spare bed in the dormitory. Feeling too embarrassed to impose further, I repeatedly declined. Some of them pulled at my hand, others pushed my back. I was so close to needing pallbearers at my own funeral. Without a blanket of my own, they spontaneously offered up things they no longer needed. At night, I'd sleep under a makeshift nest of these items, tears streaming down uncontrollably. Ironically, some of these sheets and blankets were brand new, still with their tags on. Sleeping in internet cafes, I never dared to sleep too deeply. Sometimes, people would touch me in the middle of the night. They weren't after my money, just taking advantage. It was nerve-wracking. Wrapped in their care, I had the most peaceful sleep since I became homeless. I had no special skills. My diligence, greater than others, was all that kept me around. I was like a tightly wound string, fearing that any slack would make them reject me like my parents did. Fortunately, they didn't. After a month of work, the owner paid me $3,500 on payday. $3,500. That night, I counted the money over and over in my bed. Excited, finally, I was sure I really had $3,500. Here, not only did I earn a wage, but the girls would also boost my spirits with their playful compliments. They were always gossiping, critiquing this and that. After a rant, they'd quickly forget their harsh words and just laugh it off. When they were happy, they couldn't resist hugging me. I always instinctively dodged, afraid my cancer might be contagious. Though it's not. When they learned about my illness, they eagerly volunteered to help me raise funds online, adding to what they collected, insisting I must go for treatment. They stressed, must, 3 times, a flame reignited in my heart, and after much thought, I called the doctor that night. Doctor, my sisters said they can help raise money. Once I have enough, I'll come for treatment. I could hear the doctor choking up. Okay, I'll wait for you. The gloom in my heart seemed to lift instantly. And I even started to look forward to becoming as kind-hearted as those good people. But fate always knows how to break me completely. In my dimming life, a sudden spark often signaled the burning of the last bit of fuel. 3.5 months in, an unwelcome visitor came to the store. My sister stormed into the store with a group of thugs, cigarette dangling from her lips and spewing profanities all around. When she looked up and realized that I was the sales clerk, she immediately warned me not to breathe a word to our parents, threatening to beat me up if I did. After all, she had always maintained the image of the perfect daughter in front of them. I had no intention of tattling, but she went ahead and reported the store owner for illegal labor practices. The authorities fined the store owner $15,000, which led to the shutdown of the store for reorganization, and even the other employees were left unable to work because of this. Even though they kept telling me it wasn't my fault, the fact that I had inadvertently caused them trouble was undeniable. Fairy tales always end abruptly, in that faraway place. Besides the prince and princess living happily ever after, what about the little people? They continue to live their hard lives. After putting all the wages I had earned since starting work, a little over $10,000, on the counter, I walked away silently. Though it wasn't enough to cover the owner's fine, it was all I had. With only $200 left on me, I thought it over and finally decided to send it back to my parents in a letter. As expected, they only saw it as my way of defying them, almost wishing they could teach me a lesson. Life's lessons were already harsh enough. Even the people closest to me wished me ill. It's too bitter. I won't come back in the next life. My soul didn't find release, but continued to drift back and forth with this family. My sister didn't turn out to be the lady our parents had hoped for and soon stirred up trouble. It wasn't enough that she frequently stole money from our parents for her lavish exploits, she also got involved in gang fights, standing up for her gang. She ended up getting hurt in one such brawl. She ended up with her arm in a sling. Since she was the first to throw a punch, our parents ended up having to pay compensation. In the hospital, as our parents scolded her, she sat up in her bed, all animated. What do you know? When you're out here, you have to stand by your brothers. That's the only way to get by. Before Dad could respond, the door to the hospital room was kicked open. At the entrance, a thug swaggered in, arrogance in his stride. How's Luna? Once you're better, let's go beat that guy up again. After saying this, he rubbed his nose. Oh, and Luna, the guys are short on cash for food. Can you sort it out? My sister frantically signaled him with her eyes that our parents were present. Dad picked up a thermos and hurled it at the thug, chasing after him and hitting him, returning breathless. Dad pointed at my sister and scolded, "The more I see, the more outrageous you become. If you had even half of your sister's sense, I'd be grateful." My soul stood beside my sister's bed, looking at Dad with some confusion. They said I was sensible, yet they still chose to leave me behind. Adults are so strange. My sister scoffed, "If I were as sensible as my sister, you would have abandoned me long ago." Mom's face froze, and she turned to Dad in panic. She pretended to pat my disappointing sister. "We devoted ourselves to raising you. How did you turn out like this?" My sister glared fiercely at Mom. "Don't try to gaslight me. You didn't raise my sister, and she still left you. Maybe look at yourselves for a change." After nonchalantly picking at her manicured nails, she said with haughty indifference, "Transfer another $3,000 to me, or I'll run away just like my sister did." I almost wanted to laugh at the sadness of my own situation and at my sister's naivety. Dad pointed at my sister and exclaimed, "You," then he clutched his chest, leaning against the door as he slowly slid to the ground, prompting my mother to cry out for a doctor in fear. Though Dad didn't end up in the emergency room, he was furious enough, with no one to turn to. Mom pulled out her phone and dialed my number. She tried calling 3 times, but couldn't get through, staring at the screen that wouldn't connect. She was so upset that she burst into tears. "All ungrateful wretches, so heartless. When you die, don't expect me to care." Even if they couldn't reach me, they never considered that something might have happened to me. It was always blame, nothing but blame. Mom and Dad figured instead of letting my sister hang out with riffraff in the city, it might be better for her to go back to the countryside to clear her mind, and maybe even check on me. I felt a mix of fear and anticipation. What would their reaction be when they saw my body? Fear, guilt, or disgust? They went to the toy section of the mall and after a long search didn't find what they were looking for. I was puzzled. What were they really searching for? Mom hassled the salesperson, gesturing with her hands non-stop. We are looking for that kind of doll, the one that's battery operated, with eyes that move, and it can even call out, Mommy. It turned out to be the toy doll I had always wanted, the doll I had wished for in my childhood. They only remembered after I was gone. The clerk searched the back stock and finally found a leftover item, which they bought with great excitement. Sarah would definitely be happy to see this. We'll have a talk then, they said. Dad feigned arrogance. As her father, should I really be bowing down to her? If she wants it, fine. If not, too bad. I hoped that he would maintain this pride when he saw my body. They continued their upset shopping spree and moved on to the clothing section. Laughing, they told the salesperson they were buying clothes for their eldest daughter. When asked about the size, they looked clueless, and her weight. They just looked at each other again. Finally, they bought a one-size-fits-all in utter confusion, and they confidently believed that I would be grateful for this. On the way, the blizzard blurred their vision, but fortunately, spirits don't feel the cold. I followed their car as it stopped beside my grandfather's crumbling brick wall, where Mom stepped out and cursed upon seeing the locked gate. Her black high heels sunk into the snow with each step. This child, still asleep at noon, no manners. Not even answering the phone, just wait till I deal with you. Dad also regretted his impulsive decision, should have known better than to come see her. With all this snow and cold, it's really disappointing. Until they pushed open the iron gate with a creak. The courtyard was blanketed in white, undisturbed and pristine. Only in the middle of the courtyard, a dark figure huddled, covered by the snow. Mom thought it was just some clothes that had blown into the middle of the yard. She walked over and kicked with her foot. Only when she felt the solidness beneath her foot did she fall to the ground. Ah, a scream pierced through the wind and snow. Her mother, gasping for air, still couldn't believe it. Am I seeing things? Her sister, clearing the snow off with a kick, shrieked upon seeing clearly. It's my sister. Her father, following the direction pointed by her sister, hurried over through the snow. My body was stiff, like a piece of meat frozen solid, with one pull. My father turned me over, curled up, face buried in my arms, my eyelashes frosted over. I resembled a peacefully sleeping cat. I couldn't bear to see my own dreadful state and slowly closed my eyes. Almost at the same moment, my mother broke down crying, probably terrified by the sight of my dead body. Startled, my sister ran to the side and vomited, insisting on leaving. My parents sat in the main room. Their expressions varied. Only now did they realize that the house, which used to shelter them from the wind, was already leaking from all sides. The table bore frozen buns, a bowl of ice-cold water, and the cold sweet potatoes in the hearth's ashes. These traces of my life constantly reminded them of the kind of days I had endured. My father was still in shock, barely coming to his senses, as my mother kept muttering, I told you we should have come to see her, but you insisted she might follow us back, and now look, enough, my father snapped, slamming the table and dislodging a layer of dust. I was the one who said she should come back to see her grandfather, otherwise she'd resent us, but you wouldn't listen, and now you blame me. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes. Wasn't it because you said you were too busy with work, that if you could look after Luna, you couldn't take care of Sarah? How can you blame only me? After a round of mutual blame, they eventually concluded that my death was an accident. It was unavoidable and no one's fault. This explanation gradually became acceptable to them, and their expressions softened. Just then, a ringtone echoed through the house, startling my parents. Following the sound, they found an old power strip where a phone was still charging. Clearly mine. My father sighed with relief, but with a puzzled tone answered the call. It was the doctor, asking when I would come for chemotherapy. What chemotherapy? My father furrowed his brows. Upon realizing it was my father on the line, the doctor explained the circumstances of my cancer. The phone slipped from my father's hand as he slumped, weakened. My mother covered her mouth, tears uncontrollably streaming down. How could this happen? She was so young, so she was really sick. She even reached out to us for help, but we missed it, thinking she was just being dramatic. She clutched at my father's clothes, crying and tearing at them. Sarah's death is our fault. It's all my fault. She could have lived well. My father pushed my mother away and wept loudly without regard for his image. How could I not know, my Sarah? I doubted my eyes as I saw their tears of regret. Where had their parental pride gone? They actually felt they were wrong, but what use was it? I was already dead. Please make my departure a bit more dignified. Mom packed up my things, took off her coat, and wrapped me tightly. Since a body can't bend, I ended up being stuffed into the trunk in the end. On the drive back, my parents continued arguing, each blaming the other for their failings towards me. Eventually, Dad lost control of his emotions and, compounded by the heavy snow and slippery roads, the car crashed into a large tree. All three of them were injured to varying degrees, and the car began to emit white smoke. Instead of checking on my sister's injuries first, both parents immediately got out of the car and ran towards the trunk. Mom held me in her arms, murmuring, "I'm sorry, Sarah. It's all Mom's fault. I've dragged you into this again." Dad was fixing my hair, tears streaming down his face. "Why, Sarah, why won't you give us a chance to atone? There's no going back now." It's strange, they seem to regret everything and show their love for me only after I'm dead. Unable to stand it anymore, my sister, covering a wound on her head, opened the car door and yelled at them, "All you care about is my sister, and she's dead. You nearly killed me too, do you realize that?" Seeing that our parents ignored her, focusing only on arranging my appearance, she angrily ran off in the opposite direction. It took a while for my parents to snap out of it and start looking for my sister. Eventually, my sister sent a threatening message on her own initiative. "Send me $30,000 and I'll come back." My spirit watched as she, now sitting askew in an internet cafe booth with headphones on, bragged to some youths nearby, "Watch, my parents will beg me to take the money. Now that my sister is dead, they'll have to treat me like a saint." The boys around her were impressed. "Luna is mighty." Meanwhile, in the funeral home, my mother, tears streaming down her face, was dressing me in new clothes she had bought. It was the first time in years that Mom had bought me new clothes, and ironically, they were funeral garments. Mom shook out the old clothes, and a small notebook slipped from my pocket. Startled, I tried to grab it but my hand passed right through. It was my notebook, recording all the kindness people had shown me. Following the clues in the notebook, my parents found the internet cafe manager. To express their gratitude, they brought him a New Year's gift. The manager, still indifferent, glanced up at my parents and scoffed. He flung the money in their faces. "With all this money to show off in front of strangers, why didn't you treat her better?" He choked up as he spoke. "Do you know what kind of life she was leading here, surviving on a packet of ramen a day? So thin she was just skin and bones, her face swollen like a blister. How could you call yourselves parents?" He seemed resigned. "Forget it. Just find her and treat her right." My parents covered their faces and wept, their tears uncontrollable. "Sarah is gone." What? Curses filled the internet cafe as my parents were unceremoniously chased out. Looking at each other, they both saw regret in the other's eyes. They hastened their pace, desperate to know what had happened to me before I left. What exactly hastened my death? The convenience store staff looked at each other until my parents produced a photograph. The little girl picking up trash. With faces full of embarrassment and pity, my parents anxiously asked, Picking up trash. Is she collecting trash to sell for money? Selling for money?" The clerk frowned deeply, her gaze filled with disdain as she looked at my parents. One of the sisters grabbed my mother's sleeve and dragged her outside to the garbage bins. Without allowing any questions from my parents, she pushed my mother's head into the garbage can. The heavy stench of decay, mixed with a sour smell, overwhelmed my mother, making her vomit. The clerk cursed loudly. "See. She's been scavenging through this trash for food, surviving on whatever she finds. And you, as her parents, where were you? Dressed in branded clothes, carrying designer bags, yet your daughter lives off trash." Unable to bear it any longer, my mother collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. "My Sarah, why did you live such a hard life and never come to us?" My father took a deep drag of his cigarette, then pressed the lit end against the back of his hand, hissing in pain. Watching their profound regret, I felt no warmth in my heart. If only a fraction of their love for my sister could have been shared with me, my life wouldn't have been so miserable. Eventually, they headed to a bubble tea shop. The shop owner, with his back turned, clenched his fists tightly, closed for the day. were shutting down and not serving anyone. My parents stopped in front of the shuttered door, nearly kneeling down. They said I was dead and just wanted to see the place where I had lived one last time. Everyone paused at their words. What did you say? After hearing the full story, the shop owner burst into laughter, finding my parents' reasoning absurd. Do you know how Sarah died? My mother, her nose swollen from crying, looked confused. Didn't she die of cancer? The shop owner suddenly lost control, yelling, cancer couldn't kill her. It was you who killed her, you and your precious other daughter. My father, stunned, said, what does Luna have to do with this? Finally, my parents understood the whole truth. I had been determined to focus on my treatment, clearly capable of surviving past this winter and perhaps even longer, but all hope was buried by them this winter. I had never seen them break down like this, crying like a child who had lost its candy, their sorrow genuine and deep. My soul witnessed this emotional reckoning, and I, too, shed tears, but what use was it? I was already dead. Mom, Dad, and my younger sister agreed to meet at a restaurant. My sister walked in with a lollipop in her mouth, slouching carelessly in her chair with a lackadaisical air. Now do you regret it? I knew you'd beg me to come back. Now I want an extra 10,000. Mom and Dad's faces were as cold as ice as they looked straight at her and slowly said, from now on, we are cutting ties with you. I was surprised and looked at them, thinking they were joking. Yet their expressions were too resolute when they spoke. A wicked smile froze on my sister's face as she looked up in shock. What? Then, as if she had an epiphany, she said, oh, I get it. You're trying to use this to threaten me, to keep me tied to you for life. Dream on. Mom's voice choked up. Your sister was making it on her own outside, and you had to block her last escape, causing her illness to worsen drastically. You did it on purpose to kill her, once exposed. My sister dropped her act. And what about you too? Why blame me when you never treated her well when she was alive, and now pretend to love her after she's gone? Aren't you disgusted with yourselves? Clearly, they had no intention of arguing further and stood up. That's all we have to say. We need to take care of your sister's affairs now. She frantically grabbed Dad's sleeve. What about my 30,000? I'm in debt. If you don't give it to me, aren't you forcing me to my death? Dad shook her off and walked away without looking back. Unexpectedly, a resentful thug hiding in the corner suddenly rushed out and stabbed Dad several times. My sister was stunned, and in her daze, the thug dragged her away. They passed through my spirit and ran into the distance. Mom frantically pressed on Dad's bleeding body, crying out, call 120 quickly. Dad was critically injured, and Mom could only worry outside the emergency room, but before even a few hours had passed, the hospital was thrown into chaos again. A boy riding a motorcycle with a girl was speeding down the road, lost control, and both were thrown from the bike. The boy's helmet was half scraped off, and the girl, who wasn't wearing a helmet, died instantly. That girl was my sister, Luna. Mom's hair turned white almost overnight. As the snow began to fall outside the window, I watched Mom kneeling in the hospital corridor, continuously repenting. Sarah, if Mom hadn't been biased, would things have turned out differently? Mom and Dad regret it. Please forgive us. It's all in the past. I turned around, and a light gradually brightened behind me. At the end of the road, I finally saw the person I longed for. Grandpa, smiling warmly, waved at me. Come here, my dear child. Let Grandpa carry you. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.